My first year after death, my daughter, not yet a year old, cried for her mother while Jeffrey clumsily tried to soothe her, his usually neat shirt wrinkled all over. The second year, my daughter learned to walk, her steps unsteady. Jeffrey took her to my grave and said, "Mia, this is your mom." The third year, Mia started kindergarten and was pushed to the ground by her classmates. "Your mom doesn't want you, poor thing," they taunted. She cried silently, too scared to speak up. Jeffrey left his work abruptly to take her home. The little girl looked up and asked, "Daddy, why am I the only one without a mom?" The man was silent all the way home. The fourth year, I appeared at Jeffrey's blind date dinner. He said to the woman across him, "Then let's give it a try." I died in what was the happiest year of my life. My loved ones were all around me, and my career was on the rise. Before heading to work in the morning, Jeffrey would reach the door, then turn back to say, "The company is giving us a holiday. Where would you like to go?" We had been too busy to take a honeymoon after our wedding. I thought for a long time and then said, "You decide." He frowned slightly but said nothing more. His assistant, accustomed to our way of interacting, simply waited silently. It was a marriage of convenience, in name only. He coughed softly to remind, "Mr. Jeffrey, it's almost time for the meeting." I walked him to the door. Before getting into the car, he reminded, "It's raining, don't come out." At noon, I coaxed Mia to sleep, not yet a year old. She was very clingy and needed to be held to sleep. She looked like her father, but her temperament was different. Jeffrey had taken over the company early, always clear-cut in business, distant and detached in personal dealings. He was merely courteous to me. My mother-in-law called, saying she hadn't seen her granddaughter for days. She wasn't fond of me, her daughter-in-law, but was very close to Mia. They say this is the closeness of skipping a generation. I promised to send Mia over in a few days. It would also free up some time for Jeffrey and me to go on a vacation. Mrs. Kathy called asking for money. She was playing mahjong. Her fellow players asked who was on the phone. "Oh, just my daughter who snagged a rich man. She's quite the wealthy lady now. I'm out of money. Remember to transfer 50,000. I remained silent. Accustomed to it by now, Mrs. Kathy resumed her usual venomous talk. "Drink more iced coffee, anyway. When you get sick, I'll be setting off fireworks to celebrate. And if that boy Jeffrey is harsh to you, don't come back telling me. I can't be bothered to care." Giving birth to Mia, I nearly didn't survive a severe hemorrhage. I'm not sure if Mrs. Kathy is just sharp-tongued but soft-hearted, or if she truly dislikes me. In the afternoon, I thought of Jeffrey probably having to work late. The company had recently taken on a big project. I had personally led the team to secure it during my pregnancy. During my maternity leave, he took over, often too busy to even eat. I made chicken soup, planning to secretly deliver it to his office. He mustn't find out, or he'd nag me again. He used to be a man of few words, but having a child seemed to have made him unusually talkative. Waiting for the traffic light at noon, precisely at 12, Jeffrey's message arrived punctually. "The plum blossoms you planted have bloomed. I'll bring some back for you tonight." He had a plum tree growing in his office. I planted it, but I lacked the patience, so the care was taken over by his assistant. He reports the growth daily. When the green light turned on, I put down the phone I was editing. An elderly woman hurried along with a bag full of oranges. As she reached the middle of the crosswalk, her bag tore, spilling oranges all over the ground. Behind her, there was a cacophony of honking. Her mobility wasn't great, and she couldn't catch the oranges rolling away. I turned on my hazard lights and got out to explain the situation to the cars immediately behind me. Nobody made a fuss. They all understood and took a detour. For safety, I placed a warning sign 200 meters behind my car. "Grandma, you go wait for me across the street." The rain began to pour, and I gave the only umbrella from the car to the elderly lady. She was deaf and mute, shakily making a few gestures that seemed to be her way of saying thank you. Her clothes were patched up, and her shoes looked mismatched, likely found, one larger than the other. There was also a sign on the ground listing the price of the oranges, 50 cents a kilo. These might be the only things she could sell for some money. I grabbed a clean bag. Braving the rain, I began picking up the oranges from under the car wheels. I wondered how much money I should give her. There was a vacant room on the first floor of my house, which would be suitable for her given her difficulty with stairs. The sound of a truck skidding grew from distant to near. In less than 10 seconds, the oranges I had just picked up rolled onto the ground again, crushed into pulp by the truck. I struggled to keep my eyes open, voice lost. seeing double. The elderly woman was crying and shouting. She couldn't run. Falling after a few steps, the truck driver jumped out, pale as a sheet. Alternating between making calls and checking if I was still alive. The wind made my eyelids heavy, blood poured out every time I opened my mouth. In those last few breaths, I thought of many things. Would Kathy be very upset? Probably not. Every year on my father's death anniversary, she would lock herself in her room, drink a lot of alcohol, and rant nonstop. She always called me a deadbeat, always saying, "If it weren't for you holding me back, I would have married a rich man by now." Hearing of my death, she would probably feel relieved. Would Mia cry for her mom? Oh, I forgot she's not even a year old yet. She's so young. She probably won't remember me. What about Jeffrey? Would he be saddened? I haven't yet seen the plum blossoms he brought back. The gloomy, rainy day was filled with the wails of the wind. My body was wheeled out of the emergency room. Blood had soaked through the white sheets. The doctor removed his mask. "I'm sorry, Jeffrey slowly lifted his head. His shirt soaked through with rain. He looked utterly disheveled. I had never seen him like this before. In all the years I've known him, no matter the situation, he was always composed, so much so that I always felt, if it weren't for the unexpected child, this marriage was bound to end eventually. He walked over, step by step, gently. He lifted the white cloth covering my face. The back of his hand bore scars from hitting something hard, a stark and shocking sight. My death was not a pretty one. My face was covered in blood, his lips were tight, and he opened his mouth several times. The words were never spoken, the emotions in his eyes were indistinct and hard to articulate. Jeffrey was terrifyingly composed. Would he be sad? I couldn't help but wonder. Probably not, perhaps in a few years. He would remarry and completely forget about me. After all, Karen was quite ordinary, so ordinary that anyone could replace her. The man slowly opened his hands. A few bright red plum blossoms lay in his palm. After a long while, he finally spoke. "Aren't you going to look at the plum blossoms you planted?" He always kept his promises, and this time was no exception. Unseen, I smiled at the plum blossoms. Beautiful. Unfortunately, he couldn't hear me. Mrs. Kathy was the last to arrive. She still carried the smell of cigarette smoke from the mahjong parlor. Somewhat dazed, she staggered along the corridor, occasionally needing to lean on the wall. What happened to Karen? Where is Karen? That damned girl. Did she trick me into coming here? Stop hiding. I'm busy and don't have time for games. A nurse reminded her to keep her voice down. As they were in a hospital, she suddenly stopped. Her gaze fixed on the bed outside the operating room. Her expression panicked. She grabbed the nurse's hand, her body trembling uncontrollably, swallowing her fear. She kept asking the nurse, "I'm looking for Karen. Where is she? Please, can you help me find her quickly?" Even her voice had changed. The doctor calmly told her that I had died. She calmed down. She came over and touched my face and eyes. Her fingers fell and paused at my nose. "Dead. Good that she's dead. Good that she's dead." She slowly turned around, her gaze numb, walking back the way she had come. But it wasn't long before Mrs. Kathy collapsed to the floor, unable to stand. The doctor went over to help. She clutched at his pristine white coat, pleading, "There must still be hope, right? Please try again." The doctor's expression was grave, the answer clear. She wouldn't give up, kneeling on the ground. "I beg you, save her. My daughter was still breathing just now. She's not really dead. I don't believe it. Feel her hand. It's still warm." The woman cried out hoarsely, banging her head on the floor, again and again, each time harder than the last. "She was just calling for me. I'm begging you, my daughter is not really dead." It was chaos everywhere. Meanwhile, Jeffrey leaned down, closed his eyes, and kissed my dirt-stained forehead, his voice softer than the wind. "Let's go home." I stood frozen, unable to clearly see this scene. The funeral was held 3 days later. I was placed in a refrigerated casket. Jeffrey went to handle the accident. The truck driver was drunk driving, and it was raining that day, making the roads slippery. He was found fully responsible. The man cried, kneeling on the ground, saying he had elderly parents and young children, begging Jeffrey to show mercy and let him go. Mrs. Kathy, holding a knife, was stopped as she entered, her gaze terrifying. A group of people, young and old, also began to cry, tugging at the heartstrings of onlookers. I pursed my lips, unsure of what to do. I looked at the seated man. He slowly twirled the wedding ring on his ring finger and spoke coldly. "Is she really innocent?" The driver nodded. and the crying ceased abruptly. Jeffrey said, "The person you killed was only 25 years old." He paused slightly, his voice strained. "Wasn't she innocent?" The driver hung his head in guilt, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm truly sorry. I'll do everything I can to make it right." Jeffrey stood up. Refusing to look at him anymore, he left with these words. "You can't compensate for my wife's life." My hands trembled as I looked at him, nearly in a trance. The night before the burial, Jeffrey stayed by my side, neither eating nor drinking, nor speaking. He was still wearing the same clothes. His parents rushed over from abroad. "Son, it's okay to cry," his mother said. The man remained unmoved. He simply said, "Mom, keep your voice down, you might disturb her." His father had someone lead away his mother, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Facing his silent son, all he could do was sigh. "Death is a part of life. You have to accept it." Jeffrey didn't respond. He never believed in fate. "I believe in you." At 17, facing two unknown paths ahead, Jeffrey had said this, but clearly, he had been careless. "I have a terrible sense of direction." During a summer camp organized by the school, we were from different schools but got lost in the same place. In the deep mountains, to bolster my courage, I introduced myself first. "Hello, I'm Karen." That year, my family was so poor we almost couldn't afford the school fees. Mrs. Kathy had followed her new boyfriend out of town, living under someone else's roof. I was so sensitive and insecure that even an unkind look from someone could confuse me for a long time. Life's hardships were indeed harsh. When we first met, Jeffrey mistook me for a boy, ready to press the alarm button as I walked out of the women's restroom. I quickly clarified, "I'm a girl." He paused, in the mirror. I touched my short hair. To someone unfamiliar, it was easy to mistake my gender. "I'm sorry," the young man apologized for his rashness, not probing curiously why a girl would have a boy's haircut like others might. At 18, during the year closest to the college entrance exam, he suddenly appeared in my class. As a transfer student with excellent grades, he became my desk mate. He intercepted a paper ball thrown at me from behind, threatening those who harassed me. He said, "I'm mentally ill." Later, I learned that he indeed had a condition. He had been kidnapped by traffickers as a child and subjected to inhumane treatment. He had spent several years in a psychiatric hospital. After confessing, his expression remained unchanged. "What happened before doesn't define what I will become." Karen, don't believe in fate. Jeffrey didn't know that I kept these words in my heart for many years. Everything before my eyes began to spin and blur. I was torn from this world and found myself in a place permeated with the aura of death. A push on my shoulder. I looked at the person approaching from behind. Their footsteps floated silently, unconsciously. They lined up, marching toward an endless path ahead. "Where is this?" "The place where the dead belong." A bowl of soup was thrust into my palm, dark and murky. I looked up at the speaker. Her body was bent, her hair white, distributing the soup of oblivion with numb motions. "Grandma." She lifted her face, just like the deaf-mute elder I met that day. "My girl, you've arrived. Drink up and start your journey, and then forget all people and things, and move on to the next phase of life. All the hatred, all the troubles, would be gone." Tears fell into the soup bowl. I said, "But I can't bear to leave." She put down the ladle and sighed. "Karen, your time is up. It's time to accept it." My name had long been marked for death. That day was inescapable. Still, I stubbornly said, "I can't bear to leave them." She reached out her withered hand and touched my head. "Your heart is kind, dying to help others. You've earned merit, and your next life will be joyful and healthy." But I don't want that. When I was pulled back to the real world, Grandma's voice still lingered in my ears. "You have 5 more years to stay here, but the chance to appear will only open when their longing for you is strongest. It might be just a few days or hours a year. After 5 years, you will be forcibly recalled to the underworld, to enter the cycle of rebirth. Conversely, if your living relatives no longer miss you, your time will gradually shorten. Karen, cherish it." On the day of the funeral, the weather was unusually fine. People came and went, all in black. I had no friends. Jeffrey had many. I only remember a few. Simon was one of them. Back then, it was he who set us up on a blind date. I still don't really understand why it was me who married Jeffrey. Simon's exact words were, "The Smith family is simple, no concerns about social status or business alliances, and it's just the two of you after marriage." I steadied my hand holding the tea, and asked, "And Jeffrey?" "Jeffrey," the man laughed casually, dragging his words. He said it didn't matter, preferably someone he knew. I thought about it, and over the years, the person he's known the longest is you, isn't it? Such a perfunctory setup. It also made me realize Jeffrey had no expectations for this marriage. Jeffrey changed into a clean suit. Simon came over, looking worriedly at him. Condolences. Then he fell silent at the sight of the suit on him. It was the one I gave him for our first birthday together after our marriage. I bought him the most expensive suit with my own money. The man barely smiled when he saw it. Not much surprise shown. Then he pulled out a jewelry necklace, a reciprocal gift. He treated the marriage like a business transaction, where neither owed anything to the other. Years have passed and the style of his suit had long been out of fashion. It looked somewhat out of place on him, with the sleeves being too short. Mrs. Cathy was nowhere to be seen throughout. I found her in a mahjong parlor. There she sat, disheveled, with a cigarette dangling from her lips, her eyes devoid of any sadness. When she won money, she would grin joyfully. If she lost, she would lash out at people, using all sorts of profanities. Some people would refuse to pay up. Never seen such a cold-hearted mother. Someone accused, "Your daughter is dead, and you don't shed a tear, yet here you are enjoying yourself. You deserve to be widowed in middle age and childless in your old age," a harbinger of doom. Before she could even smile, a cigarette ashtray struck her, causing her head to bleed. The mahjong parlor fell silent instantly. Mrs. Cathy stared at her emotionlessly. Dare to say that again. Her gaze was lifeless. Mrs. Cathy was still the same woman, just like the person I remembered from my childhood. As a child, I was seen as the freest among my peers. Coming home late wasn't a problem. I could watch cartoons during meals. Skipping school went unchecked. Parent-teacher meetings didn't faze me. It wasn't that I wasn't afraid, I just had no one to fear. Mrs. Cathy didn't work. She spent her days dating boyfriends and her nights at the mahjong parlor, always in a hurry, and I couldn't keep up. Her approach to raising me was simply ensuring I wouldn't starve. Whenever I was bullied at school, she never stood up for me, just weak. She would say, "Can't you fight back when someone hits you?" That's when I learned a lesson. Showing weakness and sharing my feelings was foolish. Later, I got into a fight that landed me in the police station, sitting there alone, waiting until it was dark. On the way back, Mrs. Cathy looked annoyed. My situation had kept her from her mahjong game. "Karen, crying won't help. I've never been soft-hearted," she declared. Handling my own emotions was the second lesson she taught me. When I turned 18, she cut me off financially, claiming it was to encourage my independence. Later, when I married Jeffrey, she would occasionally come asking for money. Mrs. Cathy was addicted to mahjong. Thankfully she didn't gamble much, and I could afford her habit. I felt inexplicably inferior in front of Jeffrey, so I never let him know about this. Afraid to break the veneer of respectability, Jeffrey had gone to the office that afternoon. A pile of work awaited him. His assistant dared only discuss work-related matters, reporting diligently all morning. Finally, as he was leaving, he whispered, "Mr. Jeffrey, the plum blossoms have withered." The man at the desk paused, then looked up at the empty lot outside the glass window. The bare branches were shedding their last petals. He stared absent-mindedly. The wound on the back of his hand had gone untreated, now beginning to scab. That conversation seemed as if it had happened just yesterday. Why plant plum blossoms? I kept digging the hole, not letting him help. Plum blossoms are resilient and proud. I hope to live as brilliantly as they do. Enduring the harsh winter until the spring sunshine arrives. He said nothing. When busy, I had no time to tend to it, but sometimes, when I found a moment, I thought of watering the plants. The soil had maintained its proper moisture, indicating that someone had been looking after it all this time. The entire company felt lifeless. No one dared to speak more than necessary, fearing they might say something wrong. Apart from being less cheerful, Jeffrey still approached his work with the same attitude: meetings, business trips, entertaining partners, 24 hours a day. He only slept for 3 hours. Despite that, he still needed sleeping pills. That day, after entertaining a client, he vomited violently in the restroom. Right after washing his hands, the nanny called. "Miss Mia has been crying non-stop, and I can't calm her down. Please, sir, come and see her." It had been a week since I had passed away. Jeffrey hadn't yet visited Mia. In the mirror, the man's knuckles turned white as he gripped his phone, his eyes, bloodshot from several sleepless nights. He lowered his head. "I understand." Mia's cries had changed in tone. For the first couple of days, the nanny had wrapped her in my clothes. which still carried my scent. The child found comfort in that, but as time passed, she became inconsolable, needing my soothing. Jeffrey washed off the smell of tobacco and alcohol and changed into clean clothes before he dared to take the child from the nanny, because he was unaccustomed. His awkward hold made Mia cry even harder. Clumsily, the man patted the child's back. "Don't cry." Then, he gently wiped the tears from her face. I watched the father and daughter with concern. An hour later, the crying hadn't stopped. Jeffrey seemed at a loss. His usually immaculate shirt was now soaked with his daughter's tears. The nanny was helpless. The man asked, "How did you use to calm her?" She replied, "If Miss cried at night, the lady of the house would come to soothe her, letting us rest. But it seems the lady always took her to the basement to calm her down." Jeffrey was momentarily stunned. I looked at his daughter in his arms with nostalgic eyes. Mia was difficult to soothe. Once she started crying, she wouldn't stop. Previously, to avoid disturbing others, I'd take her to the soundproof basement for a stroll. Holding the child in one arm, the man took the elevator to the basement. As the elevator doors opened, he paused in his step. The basement, rarely visited by him, was surprisingly cozy as arranged by me. The largest photo on the central wall was a family portrait of the three of us. It was taken shortly after I was out of danger in the hospital. Not long after I had recovered, Jeffrey, holding the tiny Mia, knelt by the hospital bed on one knee. Perhaps it was the photographer's skill that captured that moment. I was looking at my daughter, and he was looking at me. Mia's crying lessened. It seemed she liked it here. The basement was divided into 3 areas. To the left was Mia's play city, designed for ages 1 to 10, complete with dolls and transformers. To the right was her area for watching cartoons, spacious enough for the 3 of us. I even labeled the seats with our names. Jeffrey's spot was notably pristine. In the center, there was a prominently placed large sofa. If Mia ever started to crawl, "This place is sufficient." The storybook that I flipped through a few days ago to entertain her hasn't been sorted out yet. The blocks on the floor were arranged by me into a castle while she was asleep and I was bored. There's also an album next to it, mostly about Mia. I meticulously marked each photo with the date and the events of the day. The whole room is filled with my presence, as if I am still here. Jeffrey placed his daughter on the sofa and asked, "What story would you like to hear, baby?" The child couldn't speak clearly yet, waving her arms and making yeah sounds. He picked up the storybook and started to choose one. I noticed a bright yellow envelope underneath and was shocked. Rushing over to try and cover it, but the moment my body passed through it, the envelope also caught Jeffrey's attention. It was labeled, "Secrets Jeffrey doesn't know." It was in my handwriting. He looked down at those words, silent. He didn't open the letter but instead started reading a fairy tale to his daughter. His tone was stiff and serious, as if he was discussing business in a meeting room. Fortunately, Mia was very cooperative. She listened quietly. Her eyes were bright. Watching the man focused intently on the little storybook, her small, soft hand waved and touched the man's face. Jeffrey bowed his head, letting her touch as much as she wanted. Father and daughter, he watched her playfully with a rare tenderness in his eyes. If eyes were cameras, I'd want to freeze this moment. Jeffrey divided his life into 2 parts. During the day at the company, he was still the stern Mr. Jeffrey. At night, Mia clung to him, refusing to sleep unless he held her. After I left, all sorts of troubles came. The company's stock was unstable. Several companies that had been interested in partnerships adopted a wait-and-see approach. Jeffrey didn't show it, but he started coming home later. His social obligations increased. His mother couldn't stand by and watch, so she moved in to take care of Mia. However, she was usually careless about herself. Otherwise, Jeffrey wouldn't have gotten lost as a child. After Mia was hospitalized for the 3rd time due to a cold, his mother felt too guilty to take on more responsibilities. Jeffrey didn't blame her but said he would handle things himself from now on. He had to travel out of town for business in a few days. Though it was tricky, hiring a few experienced nannies seemed manageable. "I'm not dead yet," said Mrs. Cathy suddenly appearing. She must have run over. Still catching her breath, wiping sweat from her face, she entered, took a wet wipe to clean her hands. She felt Mia's forehead, which was no longer hot. Jeffrey, still worried, suggested, "Mom, why don't you go to my place? There are nannies there." Mrs. Cathy waved her hand impatiently. "Aren't you still unsure about this old lady? Didn't I raise Karen just fine? Look at her, she turned out well." After my name came up, the atmosphere dropped to zero. Jeffrey took a phone call and stepped out. The mother-in-law watched the child on the hospital bed and secretly wiped away tears, realizing her mistake, possibly feeling guilty. Mrs. Kathy started to find chores to do. She began peeling a pear. Distracted, the mother-in-law turned around and said with a tone of disdain, "It's all blood, who would dare to eat it?" In the end, Mia was taken away by Jeffrey. He didn't trust anyone. At the social gathering, Jeffrey handled everything flawlessly without giving anything away. However, his tolerance for alcohol wasn't great. Fortunately, not many people really dared to trouble him. A man received a call from a hotel. Mia was crying. He unusually panicked. While walking and taking the call, he bumped into someone. The woman's coat, draped over her shoulders, fell to the ground, and she blushed, saying, "Mr. Jeffrey." It was someone he knew. I was curious about Jeffrey's reaction. After all, she was the first woman rumored to be involved with him. The nanny called again to say the young lady had stopped crying. The man relaxed his brows, only then noticing someone greeting him. His gaze was unfamiliar, merely nodding slightly. Clearly, he didn't remember Winnie. A flash of awkwardness crossed the woman's face. She was beautiful, a rarity in the entertainment industry. That's why she was so confident in seducing Jeffrey that night. In a state of confusion, she spilled her drink on his suit jacket. "I'm sorry, that day was my birthday." In the morning, when Jeffrey asked what I wanted for my birthday gift, I thought for a while and said, "Just come back and have dinner with me." I really didn't want anything else. Jeffrey hadn't neglected me after our marriage. Money, cars, houses, I had them all in my name. He wasn't romantic, but he still gave gifts on various holidays, though all arranged by his assistant. That day, Jeffrey came back very late. As he opened the door, an entertainment news alert popped up. Movie star Winnie was seen leaving a bar late at night. Insiders revealed that the men's jacket draped over her shoulders belonged to the CEO of the Smith family. Suggesting a close relationship between the two, the news reflected glaringly in my eyes. I trusted Jeffrey. He wasn't the type to flirt around. This could be a big deal or not, but that night, I just felt inexplicably distracted. Jeffrey didn't take it to heart. As he turned to leave, someone grabbed his arm. The woman's hand was slender and pretty, painted with dark red nail polish. "Mr. Jeffrey." Suddenly, he thought of Karen's hands, which were also beautiful and very white. During the year they shared a desk in high school, whenever he finished his work and rested his head on the desk, his gaze would involuntarily be drawn to the hands next to him. The neatly trimmed nails had a light pink hue, very healthy. The owner of the hands had a bit of a temper, always abusing them. And every now and then they would show scars. "Mr. Jeffrey, don't you remember me?" Winnie's voice interrupted Jeffrey's memories. I got close to him to see if he treated other women the same as he treated me. Without changing his expression, Jeffrey withdrew his hand, patting off non-existent dust. His words carried a warning. "I don't know you. It's impolite to act this way upon our first meeting." Winnie paused, biting her lip. "Mr. Jeffrey, I just wanted to say thank you." That night, if it weren't for your help, I might have been vilified online. Once again, I was pulled into the dizzying familiarity of Winnie's memories. As if an onlooker, I witnessed the events of that night. She was a celebrity, every action scrutinized under the lens. Countless paparazzi stalked her in private, eagerly awaiting a slip-up for their headlines. That night, she was tricked into going to a bar. It wasn't just any bar, and once there, leaving wasn't easy. The people there were better actors than she, successful businessmen to the public eye, but predators behind closed doors. She drank a lot, pleading softly to no avail. Then, a man arrived fashionably late, dressed in a neat dark suit. His gentle eyes and demeanor were irresistibly captivating. Those people called him Mr. Jeffrey, each more respectful than the last. His arrival brought an end to the charade. He didn't drink and chose to sit quietly in a corner, not seeking attention. Occasionally checking his phone, he seemed to be waiting for something important. A ring was on his left ring finger. Married, Winnie felt a twinge of disappointment. Another person urged her to drink, and she downed a glass in response. They praised her beauty and drinking prowess, claiming that whoever married her was thrice fortunate. Only Jeffrey didn't look her way. Fueled by alcohol and a sense of indignation, she staggered over with a full glass of wine, and then, losing her balance, spilled it on the man's coat and even his phone. "Mr. Jeffrey, I'm so sorry." Everyone froze, shocked by her boldness. Jeffrey dodged her outstretched hand, his expression cooling, yet he still said, "It's okay." He was the last to arrive but the first to leave, and no one dared say more. When Winnie followed him out, she saw him casually discard his coat into a hallway trash can, rolling up his shirt sleeves as he walked away. His presence still commanding, she picked up the coat. Still warm from his touch, she had caused a scandal, creating a false rumor on purpose, she thought, even if it was just for a second, having her name linked with his was enough. Knowing the whole truth left me with mixed feelings. Fortunately, I had always believed in Jeffrey. Seeing no reaction from Jeffrey, Winnie grew anxious. That night, I accidentally spilled my drink on you. Thankfully, you didn't hold it against me. Otherwise, she shyly lowered her head, her voice fading. I've always been grateful for your kindness, Miss Winnie. Jeffrey frowned, clearly displeased. If I'm not mistaken, our relationship is that of plaintiff and defendant. I was stunned. Suddenly, I remembered that the improbable news had disappeared from the internet not long after it surfaced. However, Winnie's fans occasionally brought it up for discussion. The comments were polarized. Some accused her of shamelessness, trying to become the other woman, while others speculated that Jeffrey might have already been divorced and dating Winnie. But little did they know, Jeffrey was also aware of the situation. After all, he was so busy with work that he barely had time to eat. He didn't understand anything about the online world. Otherwise, how could he have failed to recognize that Winnie was a popular actress that night? With a look of grievance and tears in her eyes, Winnie asked, "So, by pretending not to know me, are you blaming me for what happened that day?" Since that incident, her career had plummeted and faced significant obstacles. Everyone said she had offended someone she shouldn't have. That person was none other than Jeffrey. She couldn't understand why. So she had come specifically today to seek answers. Jeffrey was not moved by her tears. Instead, his face showed a trace of impatience. "Firstly, Miss Winnie, I genuinely didn't recognize you. It was only after you mentioned that night that I remembered. Secondly, I wasn't pretending not to know you, nor was I blaming you. I was just following standard procedures. Fabrications like these have affected my company, my family, and me personally. Third," he paused, "you're really not that important to me." The woman's face turned pale, but she feigned calm and persisted. "Is it wrong that I like you and want to have some kind of relationship with you? Why are you treating me this way?" Jeffrey disliked people who played dumb. "I haven't done anything wrong. People have to pay for their own mistakes." After saying this, he walked away without looking back. Just as he was almost out of sight, Winnie shouted at his retreating figure, "Do you love Karen that much?" Jeffrey stopped momentarily, said nothing, and entered the elevator. I watched the woman beside me crying inconsolably. I felt no sympathy. I stepped forward, following the man who was walking away. The driver had been waiting for a while. After getting into the car, Jeffrey planned to feign sleep for a bit. The car entered a bustling area. There were quite a few people around, so the drive was a bit slow. Mostly, students who had just finished their evening classes filled the streets. Standing in front of a snack stall, a girl eagerly watched the food being prepared. The boy with her seemed uncomfortable with the hustle and bustle, standing with his arms crossed, a fair distance away. "Is this how you're going to appease me? After all, I've helped you with your homework for so long. You're so ungrateful." The boy hadn't finished his sentence when a takoyaki ball was stuffed into his mouth. The girl, smiling, teased, "So, are you going to eat it or not?" Blushing, the boy averted his eyes and muttered reluctantly, "I'll eat it." Jeffrey had opened his eyes at some point and witnessed the entire scene. It reminded me of a similar story from our own past. Our school had organized a debate competition. Initially, I wasn't very interested, but that changed when I saw that the first prize was $1,000. Students interested had already formed teams. I wasn't very popular. I barely spoke to the other boys or girls. The only person I could think of was my desk mate, not interested. Before I could finish, Jeffrey flatly refused. I snatched the book covering his face. With sincerity, I said, "Jeffrey, there's something in it for you." The boy, eyes closed, scoffed, not interested. When soft tactics didn't work, I resorted to a threat. Leaning close, I whispered mischievously, "If you don't agree, I'll tell the teacher you've been bringing those kinds of films to school." Jeffrey's eyes snapped open. Before I could pull away, our eyes met so closely I could see the texture of his skin and the flash of anger in his eyes. Through gritted teeth, he said, "I've told you several times, that was Simon's mix-up, not mine." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you think they believe that?" Jeffrey closed his eyes, visibly upset by my provocation. Fine. When we went to register with the teacher, she looked at us oddly. Are you sure you want to participate? I nodded eagerly. $1,000. After all, Jeffrey, resigned, said, yes. The teacher suddenly chuckled. Well, it suits you too, when we got the debate topic. We both fell silent. Will boys and girls who spend a lot of time together inevitably fall for each other? Jeffrey read it out and muttered something under his breath. It was too late for regrets. To win, I watched many debate videos, so busy I barely had time to eat. One day, Jeffrey, unable to bear it anymore, pulled me up. Really want to win? Obviously, he said. There's one way. Ever heard of learning by doing? It was a dubious idea. For the next few days, we each wore a wristband that wouldn't let us move more than 50 meters apart from each other. It constantly displayed our heart rates. I shook the wristband. Does this even work? Jeffrey, engrossed in a book, replied lazily, don't know. Before he could finish, Simon's family company developed it, intended for couples. He gave it to me to test. Turns out, you're the perfect candidate, true to form. Jeffrey never let himself be on the losing end. During that week, Jeffrey and I would only take off our wristbands after school. During gym class, he stood next to me. In the cafeteria, he sat across from me. Even when going to the bathroom, one of us would follow close by, never straying more than 50 meters apart. There was an unpleasant rumor circulating. Do you think Jeffrey and Karen are together because they're gay? After all, Karen is quite tomboyish. Exactly. When they stand together, you'd think they were both guys. Karen might be annoying at times, but with that face and short hair, she does attract some guys with different orientations. I patted the shoulder of the rumor monger. Buddy, you love to talk so much, I'm tempted to sew your mouth shut. I was notoriously infamous. They didn't dare to mess with me, quickly apologized dryly, and left. Jeffrey was waiting by the corridor, reading a book. I approached him. Let's drop out of the contest. The novelty has worn off, and I'm tired of playing. He stopped me as I was about to remove my wristband. Karen, I've never lost a competition. Jeffrey could be stubborn sometimes. Fortunately, we actually won. After receiving the $1,000, I offered him half. He didn't take it. I don't need the money. Since he didn't want the money, I suggested treating him to a meal. The young man stubbornly refused. No, that wouldn't do. I gave him a choice between two options. Reluctantly, he compromised and chose the latter. After school, I took him to a noodle shop we frequented. The noodle shop was a bit small, and the furniture somewhat worn. Jeffrey looked a bit uncomfortable, but he still joined me. 2 bowls of beef noodles were served. He pushed both bowls towards me. I don't want it, don't like cilantro. Or is it the beef? The young man shook his head, indicating he had no dietary restrictions. That settled it. As he was about to speak, I stuffed a chopstick full of beef into his mouth. Just try a bite. If you still don't like it, I'll take you somewhere else. He paused perplexedly for a few seconds, then hastily averted his eyes. Does it taste good? Yeah. His wristband's heart rate rose to an unprecedented level. Just as I leaned in to get a clearer look, he blocked me and quickly took it off. Hurriedly, he said, Simon mentioned this batch was defective. The quality isn't good. After so many years, I've thought about it. The moments with Jeffrey weren't numerous, but each was profoundly memorable. Because of my short hair, many mistook my gender. The biggest incident was when a girl from a neighboring vocational school took a liking to me. She wrote me love letters, bought flowers, and even brought a crowd of friends to block my way at the school gate. For their circle, this was the grandest gesture. It was quite an honor for me. Jeffrey wasn't there those days. He'd gone out of town for a math competition. I stayed calm. Sorry, I'm a girl, and also, I like boys. The expressions on their faces were varied. The girls smashed the flowers on my face. The thorns on the untrimmed roses scratched my face. She spat out a threat. You'll see. And that's how I got tangled up in it. Having my head washed with cold water, getting robbed, being followed. Her people were everywhere. I fell ill. When Jeffrey appeared, I thought I was hallucinating. He didn't say anything nice, just asked, Are you feeling uncomfortable? I stuffed tissue in my nose, bowed my head, not wanting him to see my teary eyes. 3 days later, when I returned to school, there was an apology letter on my desk. I heard that the vocational school girl was detained for school violence. Never saw her again. I thanked Jeffrey. He didn't even look up, just bit his lips slightly. I didn't do it. A liar holds the book upside down. I deliberately did not expose him. We only knew each other for a year. After graduation, I lost contact with everyone. I changed my SIM card. Moved to a different city. Occasionally, I'd see his figure in financial newspapers. The boy had lost his childishness and was adept in the business world. Whenever his name came up in the industry, people praised him as a young achiever. So when Simon asked, "Did Jeffrey ever look for you? Do you know?" I was really surprised. When, the summer after the college entrance exams, Simon recalled, he was about to go abroad and asked around for your whereabouts. He visited all the places you two had been to, then he gave up on his own. I bowed my head, my hands slowly twisted with nervousness. That summer was a nightmare. The only blood-related man in my life, who had served 18 years in prison, was released. Mrs. Cathy was brought back. They were either arguing or fighting. I never called him Dad. The couple had one thing in common. They both said, "If you were a boy, I wouldn't have ended up like this, drinking, hitting, swearing." A man full of bad habits. Being kicked out of the house was routine for me. Walking on the street in a daze, I ran into a classmate. She let go of her parents' hands and came over to greet me with a smile. I wore clothes that weren't warm, shoes bought years ago. I felt extremely inferior. I changed my old cell phone number, unreachable by anyone. I hoped that no one would know of my existence. The nightmare ended when a fire broke out at home. I had left early for the library because I couldn't stand it. Mrs. Cathy was ordered to buy food and drinks from the market. Only the drunk man was left at home. He died in the fire. I felt no sorrow. Instead, I felt relief. However, the fire spread to several neighbors. The compensation reached millions. Mrs. Cathy and I were burdened with huge debts. With only a mediocre education, I struggled in society for a few years and made a name for myself. But paying off the debts was still far away. They grew impatient, frequently coming to press for payment. Simon appeared at this time. I had grown out my hair and changed significantly in demeanor. He almost didn't recognize me and helped me out. After some small talk, I learned that the company we were in belonged to his family. Later, as we met more often and grew closer, he suddenly brought up Jeffrey's recent situation. Later on, we talked about the arrangement of our match. The moment I nodded, I had weighed the pros and cons from many aspects. To put it bluntly, there were too many benefits to marrying Jeffrey. I simply couldn't refuse. Ideally speaking, marrying him was like reaching above my station. If I missed this opportunity, there wouldn't be another. Falling for Jeffrey was not surprising at all. The fondness from our youth had accumulated. When we met again, these feelings transformed into tangible vows. Once spoken, there was no turning back. "Do you have a cigarette?" Jeffrey suddenly spoke up. The driver replied, "Sorry, Mr. Jeffrey, I don't smoke." Jeffrey dislikes the smell of smoke, so those around him are non-smokers. I saw him say, "Drop me off at the roadside. The hotel is close. I'll walk back." The car slowly came to a stop. He got out. Not even bothering to take his coat, he entered a convenience store. He had never bought cigarettes before. He stood at the counter for a long time until the clerk asked him. Then he randomly picked a pack, Mont Blanc. He also bought a lighter. Sitting on the chair outside the convenience store, his smoking was clumsy. He choked on his first inhalation. As he bent over coughing, I couldn't help but pat his back. "Smoking isn't good, don't pick it up." He couldn't see or hear. Across the dark alley, a group of students were pushing a girl. "Kneel and apologize, and we'll let you go." Such a familiar scene. I had been through it. The wind was strong. Jeffrey tried several times but couldn't light the second cigarette. He held the cigarette in his mouth and threw the lighter at the leader of the bullies. "Who's that?" The student turned around to see a stern-faced adult. His voice instantly lowered, and his bravado faded. Jeffrey glared and said, "Scram." The group fled in panic. The bullied girl wiped her tears, approached timidly, and bowed several times. Thanking him repeatedly, Jeffrey told her to go home early. He was about to leave too. Just as he was getting up, the girl quickly uttered many blessings. "May you live a long life, happy and healthy." Perhaps noticing Jeffrey's ring, she added, "May you have a harmonious union for 100 years. Watching the girl's retreating figure, Jeffrey murmured softly, "A harmonious union for 100 years. The wind scattered the self-deprecating tone in his voice. "There won't be another." After Jeffrey arrived at the hotel, he stayed for a while with Mia, who had fallen asleep. Then he returned to his room. After a shower, he sat alone on the balcony. He received an international call in Japanese. Having learned various languages while following Jeffrey in business over the years, I understood what the other side was saying. Hello, Mr. Jeffrey. You have a reservation at a hot spring resort in Hokkaido for tomorrow. Would you like us to provide a pickup service? Before I could react, the man, looking weary, lowered his voice. No, thank you, as the other side was about to end the call with formalities. Wait, Jeffrey spoke calmly and efficiently. Please keep that room reserved for me indefinitely. I will pay double for the period. Although the other party did not quite understand this request, they still respected the guest's wishes. All right, the call ended a long time ago. I flexed my fingers, almost stiff from inactivity. Can a dead person still have a heartbeat? Certainly not, yet, for some reason, I felt a painful tugging at my heart. That day, Jeffrey stood at the door asking where I wanted to go for fun. The first place that came to my mind was Hokkaido. I'd heard its snowscapes were unparalleled. Coming from the south, I rarely saw snow. The only time was when I traveled north on a business trip with Jeffrey. As soon as we got off the plane, the cold made me sneeze. He took off his coat and wrapped it around me. Do you like the snow? My nose was red from the cold, but my eyes couldn't hide my excitement as I nodded gently. I had so much fun that time. On the way back, I searched for places with beautiful snow, and Hokkaido was the first to pop up, but it was a bit far, and we hadn't had time for a honeymoon in the past few years because he was too busy. After expanding a few branches overseas, his responsibilities only grew heavier. Not wanting to hinder his work, I kept my mouth shut and left the decision to him. Jeffrey was not one for surprises, so I didn't hold much hope. I didn't blame him, but unexpectedly, he knew what I wanted and had already prepared everything. I sat on the sofa across from him, watching his discontented expression, and impulsively reached out to soothe him. Karen, he suddenly spoke. My body shivered, and my mind went blank. Just when I thought Jeffrey might see me, he lowered his gaze to the wedding ring on his finger. Everything before my eyes started to blur. Time was up. I couldn't wait for his next words. This was my second year since dying. Once I became conscious, I heard a child's voice. Mommy, a little girl in a princess dress sat laughing among her toys. It was Mia. I watched her, a bit bewildered. Jeffrey came from behind, bent down to pick her up, and gently kissed her cheek, his eyes and brows filled with tenderness. So clever. Mia giggled and clung to his neck, continuing to call out, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. That was the first phrase she learned. The basement still looked the same, except it now held many photos of Mia. Some of them also featured Jeffrey, Mia's first birthday party, Mia's first steps, Mia's first trip to the amusement park. All her milestones were captured. I looked intently, trying to feel the emotions of those days through the wall full of photos. Jeffrey didn't like to take photos or smile much. He tended to keep his emotions hidden, so it was hard to capture any feelings from those photos. Today, Jeffrey didn't go to the office. He wore a slightly casual suit. Mia was dressed up like a little princess. There was a happy occasion today. Simon was getting married, the same Simon who, at our wedding, drank too much and bluntly declared, I won't tie myself down in marriage before 30. In their circle, early marriages were either for family interests or after having had one's fill of adventures. Jeffrey and I didn't fit either description. There were many guests, and Jeffrey, holding his daughter with one arm, attracted quite a bit of attention. He was already accustomed to it. Mia, who was only 2 years old, clung nervously to her father's neck with both hands. Simon came over to say hello. Don't rush off later, I have something to tell you. He had prepared a doll for Mia, which successfully diverted the little girl's attention. Everyone seated with Jeffrey was familiar. They all knew what to say and what not to say, playfully engaging Mia. Thinking about it, this was Jeffrey's first time attending a wedding of someone his age. He was the earliest among his peers to get married. There was an empty seat next to Jeffrey. I sat down. The wedding stage was close by, and the light shining over made me inexplicably think of our own wedding. The Smith family was particular about choosing the right dates for significant events. Yet, when I learned that the wedding was set for next month, I couldn't help but ask Jeffrey, isn't that too soon? It was indeed quick. From our reunion, mutual agreement, to now, it had only been 2 weeks. Back then, Jeffrey had put his job second to accompany me to try on wedding dresses. The elders have picked it out. The 8th of next month is a good date. If you're not comfortable, we can postpone it. I thought about it. It was already set in stone. Sooner or later I had to marry, and there seemed nothing unacceptable about it. The wedding ring arrived the day before the wedding. I had chosen the design and had my finger measured. When Jeffrey slipped it onto my ring finger, It fit perfectly, adorned with a unique teardrop-shaped diamond. I didn't understand its value, I only heard Simon mention it once. One of a kind in the world, very precious. The ring was buried with the ashes on the day of the interment. When the officiant asked the groom if he was willing, the usually composed Mr. Simon, his eyes reddened, said, "I do." The bride opposite him was the woman he had pursued for a long time. At the moment of applause, they kissed, unnoticed. Someone left early. I watched as he absent-mindedly bumped into someone. Sorry. The person recognized Jeffrey, Mr. Jeffrey. "You're also here for Mr. Simon's wedding. What a pleasure." It was Mr. David, who had collaborated with him years ago. After that, the company shifted its focus overseas, and he had handed over responsibility for the local branch. Extending his hand regretfully, he said, "I'm sorry I couldn't attend your wedding back then. I was unavoidably detained. My belated wishes for a long life together. Please forgive me." Jeffrey's expression was unchanged, but he didn't extend his hand. Mr. David's secretary went pale, tugged at his sleeve, and whispered into his ear, "Mrs. Jeffrey died in a car accident last year." Mr. David, visibly embarrassed, didn't know how to react. "I have another matter to attend to," the young man said indifferently as he walked away. Jeffrey found a quiet place. He made a call to have Mia sent home. He took out a cigarette, pulled one from the pack, and lit it expertly. Through the haze of smoke, I stood silently beside him. Suddenly, I remembered a day. Though I couldn't recall exactly when, I was smoking in the restroom when Jeffrey caught me. I hid the cigarette behind my back. His gaze didn't linger long, nor did he ask any questions, but later that evening, he knocked on my study door. "Can we talk?" I thought he was going to tell me to stop smoking or something like that. I let the man come in, sit down, and prepared myself to listen attentively. "Have you been troubled by anything lately?" I looked up, meeting his gentle eyes, and was taken aback. He pulled out a brand new pack of cigarettes from his bag. "I don't know much about cigarettes, but Simon told me these are the best and the least harmful to your health. However, if you're smoking to ease your worries, I'd rather you talk to me about them. Karen, I'm your husband." After that day, I quit smoking. In the evening, Simon organized a gathering and invited quite a few people. There were those drinking, singing, playing mahjong, quite a lively scene. Jeffrey was a breath of fresh air. His phone was filled with photos of our daughter, deciding which ones to print. After Simon had his fill of fun, he sat down beside me, coming all this way and not planning to drink. Since arriving, the man had only ordered a cup of hot water. "Did my mom ask you to speak for her?" He turned off his phone and sat up straight. Indeed, nothing escapes his notice. Simon felt a bit guilty. Auntie came pleading to me. It would be too cruel to refuse. I couldn't grasp what riddle these two were playing. It seemed that a lot had happened during my absence. "She's gotten old." Simon paused to find the right words, leaned in closer, and said, "She's worried about you, and, actually, I agree with her. The girls chosen for you are all outstanding, aware of your situation, and they don't mind Mia's presence. Don't you want to think about it?" At this point, there was nothing I didn't understand. I had thought about this day coming. But now that it was here, I couldn't help feeling sad. Jeffrey took a sip of water, his fingers tightening around the glass. The room was dimly lit, making it hard to read his expression. "Simon, I can't forget her." My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't take my eyes off Jeffrey. Had I heard wrong? I slowly moved a few steps closer, close enough to touch. Simon's smile faded. He asked earnestly, "How important is Karen to you?" I slowed my breathing, afraid to miss his important response. After a quiet moment, I heard it. He said, "Everything." Jeffrey never was one for romantic words, but to me, those two words surpassed all declarations of love. Simon wasn't the brightest scholar and couldn't spout profound theories. He sighed over this relationship, recalling a popular online phrase, "Love and separation are the lifelong unsolvable dilemmas of Crane Calling Pavilion." I went to see Mrs. Cathy. She had changed a lot. She had cut her hair very short, thrown out all her makeup, broken up with her boyfriend. She had also quit playing mahjong and started doing handicrafts. She was making peace charms for a temple. From morning till night, she would embroider all day long. Jeffrey had hired a caregiver for her, but she refused, saying she wasn't used to having strangers at home. In her youth, Mrs. Cathy, she certainly had an eccentric temperament. She loved smoking, had tattoos, enjoyed extreme sports, and had a peculiar hatred for alcohol. That was because my father loved to drink. She despised everything associated with him. In the past, I always disapproved of her promiscuity, breaking up with one person only to quickly find another. But now, as I look at the empty house, seeing her sitting alone on the sofa, silent for the entire day, I feel regret. The next day, Mrs. Cathy got up very early. After spending the morning bustling about in the kitchen, she carefully packed the food she had prepared into a thermal container. Then she changed her clothes, curious about what she was up to. I followed her. Mrs. Cathy hailed a taxi by the roadside. Driver, to the West Suburbs Cemetery, please. I glanced at the car's display screen. December 15th, my death anniversary. Mrs. Cathy was quite talkative, chatting with the driver along the way, almost missing her stop. After getting out, she didn't rush to enter. It was Sunday, and the cemetery was crowded. She stopped at a flower shop near the entrance. Her eyes critically surveyed the fresh flowers. Finally, she chose a bouquet of plum blossoms. The cemetery was uphill. Mrs. Cathy walked, panting and slowing down. I slowed my pace too, feeling that something was off with her. But in this world, my time was limited, and I couldn't verify. As the sky clouded over, Mrs. Cathy finally arrived. She placed the still warm food in front of the tombstone. Her movements were gentle, but her words were not. You little rascal, you gave me so much trouble when you were alive, and even in death you're a burden, making me trek all this way every time I visit. In the past, I always disliked her nagging. It was as if she was channeling the frustrations she couldn't vent on my father onto me. But now, quietly listening, I felt a sense of peace. The photo on the tombstone showed me smiling. Even I was taken aback, as it had been a long time since I'd seen myself smile like that. Mrs. Cathy wiped the drifting incense ash with her sleeve. Her voice was ethereal. Karen, Jeffrey came over in the afternoon. He walked slowly, holding Mia's hand. The little girl's steps were becoming steadier. She held a plum blossom in her hand. Jeffrey guided her to place the flower in front of the tombstone. Then, he crouched down and said gently, Mia. This is your mom. That was the first word she learned. She was too young to understand why her mom was in a neatly framed picture. Still, she vaguely called out, Mommy. I responded with a smile. My eyes were moistening. Jeffrey gently smiled and stroked her head. It's snowing. I slowly looked up. The snowflakes falling into my eyes felt cool. Jeffrey told her, Mom says she hears you, and this is her gift to you. Mia stretched out her hands, her eyes curving into a smile. Mommy. The tears at the corners of my eyes just wouldn't dry. I bent down and kissed her forehead gently. I am here. It's been 3 years since I died. Mia has started kindergarten. She's very smart and has learned many words. She can read all the storybooks I bought for her by herself. Jeffrey never shied away from discussing death in front of her. Death is not the end. Being forgotten is. So she understood that this mom she never met wasn't coming back. 3.5-year-old Mia had a maturity beyond her peers. She enjoyed the quiet, loved to draw, and could spend a whole day staring at an animal. Jeffrey consulted a psychologist. It wasn't a psychological issue, it was just her natural way. In her first craft class at kindergarten, the teacher taught them to make a pocket watch. The watch was already made. It just needed the kids to decorate it and insert their favorite photo. The other kids were chattering, discussing whether to use their own photo, a pet's photo, or a family photo. When the teacher checked, Mia's was unchanged. She crouched down to ask. A little boy next to her answered on her behalf. Teacher, Mia doesn't have a mom. My mom said she might have been picked up by her dad. Since school started, it had always been Mia's dad or the nanny who came to school, even for activities requiring parents' presence. They all thought Mia was abandoned by her mom. Mia threw a tool in the boy's face. That's not true. The boy, angered, pushed her to the ground. Your mom doesn't want you, you poor thing. Mia cried silently. Jeffrey was abroad on a business trip, unreachable by phone. Her grandparents were on a vacation. Mrs. Cathy came. When I saw her, I stopped dead in my tracks, in disbelief. She had shaved her head, and wrapped in a coat, she wore a blue and white striped hospital gown, carrying the distinct smell of hospital disinfectant. She first looked at the scratches on Mia's face while the other parent continued to complain. It's all this little girl's fault. She really went at it, hurting my son like this. Really, no motherly upbringing. As if her manners were fed to the dogs. The boy was sobbing miserably, indeed looking pitiful. His hand was fractured from Mia's precise throw of a block. Mrs. Cathy never lost a quarrel. She laughed mockingly. Can't even handle a little girl. That's really pathetic. I suggest your whole family should get a genetic checkup. And what kind of upbringing can one have with a dog, a person who has raised her son like this? Discussing upbringing with such confidence in front of me really opens one's eyes. Mrs. Monica, with her eyes reddened, resorted to playing dirty and then took a tougher approach. She threatened to sue them and demanded that the school expel Mia. The school, adhering to Jeffrey's wishes, had always concealed Mia's identity. He wanted Mia to live a simple and pure life, just like everyone else, but sometimes, there are mad dogs that force one to use their authority. Mrs. Kathy took Mia back home. It seemed that Jeffrey had brought her here often over the years. The bedroom in my house had been converted into Mia's. The bedding was newly changed, and many toys were placed by the bedside. I watched as Mrs. Kathy carefully took out a medical kit and applied medicine to Mia. Does it hurt? The little girl shook her head. Calm throughout except during the fight. Grandma, yes. Can you tell me about Mom? The movement of the cotton swab cleaning the wound paused. Mrs. Kathy looked at the little girl. All right. I sat on the other side of the sofa, listening to her story. Your mom, she was nothing like me. Beautiful, gentle, naive. I didn't like that about her. Mia asked. Why? Mrs. Kathy paused for a long time. Her eyes filled with complex emotions. Because there are many bad people. They like beautiful girls and do bad things. Before I turned 18, I never grew my hair long, always sporting a short, boyish haircut, which made my gender ambiguous. I argued with her, accusing her of old feudal thinking and favoring boys over girls. Mrs. Kathy never responded, just took scissors to the new dress I had bought and shredded it. Then she threw at me the money she wheedled from her new boyfriend, telling me to buy new clothes but forbidding dresses. I never saw those boyfriends of Mrs. Kathy. She never brought them home. Only occasionally I heard from the chatty neighbors that she changed them frequently. Although they all looked more or less the same, Mrs. Kathy never denied these rumors. My bad habits, I learned them from her, smoking, fighting, but never skipping class. Mrs. Kathy said that was the bottom line. Her way of upbringing was peculiar, not like a mother. Everyone said that because I was a girl, she gave up on herself. Never intending to raise me properly, Mrs. Kathy didn't deny this either. She had many tattoos, scattered across her body. Once, she got a new one on her back, couldn't reach to apply medicine, so she asked me to help. She lifted her shirt, her back turned to me. I dipped a cotton swab in the medicine, and with glasses on. My vision was clear, the edges of her new tattoo, and an uncovered scar. It was a burn mark. The size and shape made me think of a cigarette butt. That was a spot Mrs. Kathy couldn't reach herself. That evening, Jeffrey came to pick up Mia. Seeing Mrs. Kathy's current situation, he asked, I've learned about a medical team abroad that researches your condition. What are the chances? Are you really not going to give it a try? He asked Mrs. Kathy for the third time since her diagnosis. Mrs. Kathy had remained composed, not once breaking down, as calm as if she had always known her time was short. She shook her head again. No, thank you. I've lived enough. I want to see what another world is like. Mia remembered her father mentioning that her mother was also in another world. She held her grandmother's hand. Grandma, are you going to find Mom? She was only 40 but her hair had turned white, so she had cut it all off. Her illness had drained the color from her face, dimming her once vibrant beauty, yet her eyes shone brighter than ever. Yes, she replied softly. Jeffrey had interrupted a meeting and flown back to the country immediately. There was nothing more important than Mia's affairs. Before picking up Mia, he had stopped by the kindergarten. The staff there muttered about calling the police, determined to drive Mia away. Fine, he said, glancing at his watch. My lawyer will be here in 5 minutes. Let's do everything by the book. Mrs. Monica hadn't expected that he would not only remain unafraid but also summon a lawyer. Threatening to call the police was one thing, actually bringing in a lawyer was quite another. She felt guilty. Mr. Jackson, hearing that his precious son had been hit, came directly from his company. When he saw Jeffrey, his mind reflexively acknowledged, Mr. Jeffrey, this was his boss's boss's boss. Jeffrey barely remembered him. Not due to a poor memory but because his position rarely granted him access to the president's office. After the lawyer arrived, Mr. Jackson's face went pale, and he and his family bowed in apology. It was too late. Jeffrey spoke methodically. I keep my personal and professional life separate. Mr. Jackson, you left your post without permission, and HR will likely discuss this with you tomorrow. I can't even bring myself to scold my daughter, yet your son thinks he can hit her, and your wife. Her insults toward my daughter, I remember them all. I forgot to mention, I hold grudges. Mr. Jackson's chances for promotion vanished, and he faced the possibility of midlife unemployment, feeling as if the sky had collapsed. Jeffrey never cared for playing the games of the elite. He preferred to command respect through his actions, but for this family, he didn't mind playing dirty. The lawyer was professional, treating the lawsuit as if it were child's play. The opposition didn't even dare to resist. Could they afford to compensate after striking the only daughter of the Smith family? Their home wasn't far away. Father and daughter didn't take a car but walked slowly home instead. Their shadows, one large and one small, stretched out under the streetlights. Jeffrey held her hand, carrying her little backpack in his other. Today was Christmas Eve. On their way, many children held aloft by their parents played with apples, laughter filling the air. Mommy, my cotton candy. Not far away, a little girl saw her cotton candy fall to the ground and melt quickly. She ran into her mother's arms, feeling wronged. The woman hugged her and laughed. Don't cry, Mommy will buy you 2 more. She looked so happy. Mia stopped walking, then looked up and asked, Daddy, why am I the only one without a mom? Jeffrey lowered his eyes to look at her. The innocence in the little girl's eyes was tainted with a touch of sadness. In the many years Jeffrey had spent in the cutthroat business world, it was usually others who felt intimidated. At this moment, he wanted to escape from such gazes for the first time. He didn't know why. Mia had lost her mother. He had lost his wife. Why them? The man remained silent throughout the journey. The next day, I didn't go anywhere and stayed by Mrs. Kathy's side. She hated being in the hospital. But Mia was very worried about her, her eyes swollen from crying. Grandma, can you stay with me a little longer? It was strange that Mrs. Kathy seldom spent time with her, yet, her dependence on Mrs. Kathy was second only to Jeffrey. Perhaps, she was the only family member still connected to her mother. Therefore, Mrs. Kathy, unusually compliant, took her medicine and underwent checks at the hospital. But it was all in vain. Her life was nearing its end. Mia didn't go to kindergarten today and brought her drawing board to the hospital instead. Mrs. Kathy became her model. Jeffrey had hired a makeup artist who was very skilled. After the makeup was done, she touched her face in the mirror. I look like I did when I was a teenager. Mrs. Kathy never spoke of her past or mentioned any relatives. I only remember, many years ago one night, she received a phone call. Back then, the quality of mobile phones was poor. If you spoke a bit louder, people several meters away could hear you. I heard someone on the phone scolding her for being an unfilial daughter. Ever since we forced you to marry Frank, you've held a grudge against us, becoming enemies with your own parents. You're the first to do so. Had we known, we would have let you hang yourself outside. That was the first time I saw Mrs. Kathy cry. Although I didn't know what had happened to her in the past, I knew she had never been happy. Mia was taught painting by a professional teacher. While not yet excellent, her work was heartfelt. In the paintings, Mrs. Kathy was always smiling. Vaguely reminiscent of her carefree youthful days, this period was the most relaxed of her life. She didn't have to think about anything, she just had to wait quietly. When she was younger, she was quite afraid of death, so she would do whatever she thought of, which others called madness. But she felt it was living to the fullest. When the doctor diagnosed her with terminal cancer, she thought a lot, about the past, the present, the future. In truth, there was nothing she couldn't let go of. She had always been alone. If there was one regret, it was her daughter, Karen. Mrs. Kathy disliked farewells. Perhaps sensing what was to come, she didn't want anyone around. Jeffrey waited with Mia in the hospital corridor. He sat quietly on a chair, the incandescent light above casting a shadow across his face. It was like the day my body was wheeled out of the emergency room. Death is silent. Mrs. Kathy slowly closed her eyes. In her arms, she held a painting, a frame, and in the frame was my photo. My hand passed through her face, touching only air. Mom, Mrs. Kathy. She had a beautiful name, Kathy. Her name was chosen by one of the educated elders in her family. She loved it, despite her father saying, "What's the use of such a pretty name for a girl? It would be better for her to start working early and find a good family to marry into." Kathy was bright and grasped new concepts quickly. Her teachers said she could easily gain admission to a top university. However, in that era, it was rare for girls to even attend high school, let alone university, which was considered a luxury. Her father's disapproval was nothing new. She didn't care. From Monday to Friday, she attended school diligently. On Saturdays and Sundays, she worked part-time. doing whatever job she could find. A bright and optimistic flower had blossomed in her traditional, commercial-minded family. She lived optimistically and always had a plan. Her goals were to get into a good university and date Bob. Bob was a handsome, kind-hearted boy from the next class who even fed the stray cats at school. Kathy wasn't obsessed with romance. She simply liked attractive people and wanted to date Bob without thinking about marriage. Marriage was a serious matter. Choosing poorly could result in a life like her mother's. She never hid her beauty, maintaining her long, black hair and saving money to buy dresses, which once caused a huge argument with her father. But she was stubborn and never regretted her decisions. She had everything figured out. She just needed to grow up. But then, the accident shattered her. The alley home was dark and long, the streetlights flickering. Her umbrella fell into the gutter. She was dragged deeper into the darkness. Her mouth was covered. How could a young girl's strength compare to that of a grown man? After that night, Kathy learned about suicide, yet, each attempt to end her life was thwarted. Her father insisted her mother watch her constantly. Frank is older than you, but he's a decent man. He's promised a dowry of $1,000. Be content with that. $1,000 was a significant amount at that time. She locked herself in the closet, haunted by the same nightmare repeatedly. Her arm still bore the marks of the man's grasp. She cut that part away with a blade, bloody and frightening, but not as nauseating as before. Her parents took turns trying to persuade her for a week. She compromised, but so did they. She would continue her education. Frank had been out in the real world for years, and his eyes held tricks she couldn't match. He had been watching her for a long time. That night was a premeditated impulse. Fine. She didn't know that the whole school was already buzzing with rumors. In an era where walking alone with the opposite sex was scandalous, she became a vilified sinner. People cornered her, tore up her notebooks, and threw chalk at her. But none of that was as embarrassing as when Bob showed up. Bob drove away the bullies. As she was about to thank him, she offered a newly bought milk. Thank you. The boy stopped mid-sentence and walked away. She stayed put for a while, then, struck by a thought, she ran after him. Not far away, Bob was among a group of boys. Who gave that to you? Someone I don't know. She stopped in her tracks, watching Bob. She threw the milk bottle into the trash. Why bother keeping it? She blew out the candles. Kathy felt a warmth spread through her heart, a stark contrast to the turmoil she had felt for so long. In that instant, a simple and profound hope settled within her, that the cycle of suffering might finally break with this innocent soul. And closed her eyes as well, yet her wish remained, live a long life, year after year. It seemed to become a habit. Kathy thought it was her own laziness, too lazy to think of another wish, so she didn't bother changing it. Later on, she habitually used the same wish on her own birthday. It was the wish she made for Karen. She dedicated her once-a-year birthday wish to Karen. She saw Karen secretly wearing skirts, saw her desire to grow her hair long. It reminded her of the nightmares of the past. To suppress was the best protection. She knew Karen hated her, and she didn't care. To become a little worse, not to be bound by what those so-called adults said. Girls should be gentle, girls look good with long hair. What are girls without skirts? Only by becoming a bit worse, becoming unattractive. Would the bad people not take notice? She stubbornly thought. Mrs. Kathy slowed her breathing, quiet and peaceful. She must have been having a beautiful dream, her face free from pain. Sleeping as on any ordinary day, only she would never open her eyes again. She had written her will in advance. After her death, she wanted her ashes scattered at sea. The sea never stays in one place, wandering without a home. That was another kind of freedom. It was what she wanted. Although she had been to many places in life, she still felt it was not enough. Last words are for those who can't let go. She had none. She was now off to find that regret. She had to hurry. She seemed to see Karen waving to her from the path to the underworld. That dead girl must have been anxious. She started to run. My cries grew louder and louder, calling out her name, calling her Mom, wanting to hold on to her. A great sorrow choked my throat. I could only watch helplessly. The person on the hospital bed slowly stopped breathing. The monitor beside her pulled into a piercing straight line. Her right hand dangled over the edge of the bed, and as it relaxed, something fell from her palm. It landed at my feet. It was a talisman. On the back, my name was embroidered. The 4th year, I was late, and the time seemed to have shortened. Mrs. Kathy was gone, and there were fewer people in the world who missed me. In the bedroom, I found Jeffrey. He was sick, hadn't been to the office for days. The curtains were tightly closed, not a sliver of light coming through. The floor was littered with spilled medicine bottles and pills, unclear what they were. He had pulled the blanket up high, covering his chin, his brow furrowed, looking quite uncomfortable. I had never seen Jeffrey so vulnerable. In my mind, he had always been invincible, with an extremely strong mental fortitude. He seemed to be having a bad dream, murmuring something, as if calling someone's name. I was about to lean in closer to listen when Simon burst in. His expression was grave. He opened the curtains, holding a medical kit in his hand, with the light shining in. I could see the scattered pills on the ground, all sleeping pills. Are you trying to kill yourself? The person in the bed opened his eyes, a look of exhaustion on his face. He stretched out his hand, which was covered in bruises from multiple 4 infusions. Simon was furious, not knowing where to direct his anger. But it's not something you can just ignore. He's a doctor, and lately he almost seems like Jeffrey's personal physician. Where's Mia? My wife is with her. She really likes her. Mia is Simon's son, who just turned 1 this year. With Mia, he's found a new playmate and has become a bit more cheerful. Jeffrey stared at the fluid flowing through the 4 tube, lost in thought. I really dislike seeing him like this. It's a familiar feeling. Mrs. Cathy looked just like this before she passed away. Simon spoke a lot, rambling on endlessly. His voice the only sound in the room. You were too impulsive this time. There was a lifeguard right there, but you insisted on going into the water to save someone yourself. The river was frozen. It could have killed someone. Jeffrey, if not for Mia, at least think about Karen. She would be so worried about you if she were still here. The man in the bed moved his fingers slightly, finally showing a sign of life. He half opened his eyes, his voice dreamy. Simon, I dreamed about Karen. The room suddenly fell silent. Simon shifted his gaze to the window, unable to look at him. She was alone there, scared, crying hard. His eyes were hollow, his voice matter-of-fact. Jeffrey was never one to wear his heart on his sleeve. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late to save Jeffrey. He was sick. You could say it started the day Karen died, but he hid it well, and no one noticed. Grief had turned into illness, incurable, that night, when Simon was not around. The bed was empty, only half a bottle of nutrient solution remained. It was already very late, and most shops on the street were closed. Jeffrey pushed open the door, and the shop owner was about to politely turn away the last customers. He handed over a card. Hello, I'd like to get a tattoo. Name your price. The owner hardly hesitated, asking him to take a seat. What would you like to get tattooed? Jeffrey had beautiful handwriting. He wrote down what he wanted. Karen, the owner smiled. Your loved one's name, yes. Where do you want it? Jeffrey pulled down his collar a bit, revealing skin so pale that the veins underneath were visible. On my neck. Tattooing is a meticulous task. The owner was a chatty man. Are you planning to surprise your loved one? The man half closed his eyes, seemingly oblivious to pain, staring at the shadow on the floor. Yes, the owner laughed. She'd definitely be delighted to see it, but sometimes men come here to get a tattoo and the very next day their wives bring them back to get it removed. Aren't you afraid she might get angry? Jeffrey lifted his head, the light caught in his eyes, shining very brightly. Would she get angry? The owner thought this handsome client was quite unusual, but not in a derogatory sense. His demeanor suggested he was from a traditionally conservative family, his every move refined. Getting a tattoo is often seen as a rebellious act in ordinary families, so he must really love his wife. But why then, from these conversations, does the feeling conveyed seem so desolate? The matter of Jeffrey's tattoo could be a big deal or a small one. It spread from the company to the Smith family. His mother-in-law sent Mia away to have a talk with him. The man was still sick, coughing a few times with his fist against his lips, his neck bones protruding, making him look gaunt. She was both angry and heartbroken. After all these years, can't you let it go, Jeffrey? What are you doing? No matter how good Karen was, she's gone. You should have moved on from even the best of relationships after all these years. Besides, what did you two really have, Mom? His calm demeanor shattered, revealing an uncontrollable extremism. An irrational Jeffrey was like a madman out of control. Fortunately, he managed to restrain himself and took a deep breath. He spoke slowly, apologizing. I'm sorry. His mother-in-law realized she had gone too far. Her lips moved, but she said nothing more. Simon found Jeffrey in the hospital. Are you hurt? There was blood on the cuff of Jeffrey's shirt. He didn't speak, just lifted his chin slightly. Inside, a doctor was examining a woman. Simon followed his gaze and was stunned. Is that Karen? No, not me. Someone who looks like me. My eyes grew sore from staring for so long. My body felt lighter without realizing it. Time seemed to pass very quickly, perhaps in Jeffrey's memory. That person named Karen was becoming more and more a stranger. Time rewound to an hour earlier. Someone had scraped Jeffrey's car. The other party had written a note and was just about to pin it on the handle when the car window rolled down. Her eyes sparkled with surprise, her speech stuttering. I'm sorry, sir, it was an accident. She handed over a note with her number written on it. Jeffrey's gaze lingered on her face for 3 seconds. He snuffed out the cigarette in his hand and tossed it into the ashtray. No need, the woman insisted on discussing compensation. Jeffrey was at the hospital for a checkup. His cold had become quite severe, coughing up blood. Mia cried the night before. She became distressed and pleaded with her father to come to the hospital to recover properly. The man closed the car window, pulled the keys out, and got out of the car. The person behind followed him into the elevator. Her gaze was clear. Sir, are you here for treatment? Jeffrey had no intention of chatting. Yeah. Suddenly, the woman beside him screamed, blood dripping on the floor. She looked up and with her bloodied hand grabbed his sleeve. Help, call a doctor. After Simon had examined Jeffrey, his expression revealed a sense of pessimism. He was about to give a long explanation when Jeffrey preempted him. Is it fatal? Simon was too upset to speak. He simply nodded. No death. Then it's not a big problem. After stepping out of the treatment room, someone stopped him. Sir, you haven't taken down my number yet. It was the woman from before. Her bleeding had stopped, and she was now in a hospital gown with a yellow wristband bearing her name, Lily. There was no discernible emotion on Jeffrey's face. Who asked you to come? She pretended not to understand, tilting her head and laughing innocently. What did you say? She looked so similar. Even the mole at the corner of her eye was the exact same size. No one can ever perfectly imitate Karen's every frown and smile despite being able to mimic her face. Fakes will always remain fakes. Jeffrey never bothers to communicate with someone who's pretending to sleep. It's a waste of time. He had already initiated an investigation by the time Lily went in for treatment. Everything was premeditated. Initially, Lily's appearance was quite similar to Karen's, but after some minor adjustments, the resemblance reached 90%. She contracted a disease that only the wealthy could afford to treat. Someone had told her about the CEO of the Smith Family Corporation who couldn't forget his deceased wife. The garage was the VIP entrance. She was waiting there in advance. Clearly, the plan was a failure from the start. All the poor imitations were exposed. And even though the man said nothing, his gaze alone was enough to induce an utter sense of disgrace. Mr. Jeffrey, Lily blocked his path, crying pitifully. This wasn't intentional. I just wanted to survive. Jeffrey stopped, cautioning her. Being overly emotional isn't good for your illness. Before he walked around her, Lily felt utterly disheartened. All she could do now was wait for death. A few days later, Lily received a medical grant. The donor's name was Karen. The news of Jeffrey vomiting blood at the office was kept secret. Only 2 people knew. His assistant, Simon. The assistant went back to finish the remaining work. Simon, massaging his temples and speaking in a negotiating tone, said, Don't ruin your body. Don't you plan to live past 30? Since everyone had started noticing Jeffrey's health issues, he had been urging him to seek treatment. But Jeffrey uttered a chilling statement that day. Simon, if I die, please bring me back and bury me next to Karen. He was as calm as still water, like a soulless puppet. Karen's death had taken his soul. Simon saw one word in Jeffrey's eyes, world-weary. 3 years ago, Karen died. Jeffrey didn't shed a single tear. Everyone said that the couple, as speculated by outsiders, lacked any real affection, but only he knew that this marriage, which no one held in high regard, was something Jeffrey had sought. It was Jeffrey who had asked him to propose to Karen on his behalf. At that time, he had given himself 3 options. If Karen refused, he would have Simon mediate to resolve her debts, and he would never appear before her again. If Karen hesitated, he would talk to her face to face, pursuing her in the sincerest way possible. If she agreed, Jeffrey hardly dared think that far. He didn't believe Karen actually liked him. Later, on the day their wedding was set, Jeffrey put aside all his work and flew overseas to give Karen the most beautiful diamond in the world. The wedding ring was his design. Inside it, he inscribed a message, To grow old with Karen, Jeffrey removed his four and got out of bed. There was no time left. He asked Simon for medication. No, your condition is already bad. Continuing this will lead to uncontrollable symptoms. Simon refused to indulge him any further. Jeffrey picked up a watch from the bedside table and calmly strapped it on his wrist. Without sleeping pills, I can't sleep, and if I can't sleep, my mind starts to wander. Once a person's mind begins to wander, they can end up on the wrong path. Simon knew this was a threat, but he was particularly afraid of this tactic. Reluctantly, he gave Jeffrey a new box of medicine. Jeffrey went home early, since today is Mia's birthday. The Smith family celebrates birthdays in a simple way. Just among themselves, he placed the diamond crown on the little princess's head. Happy birthday. The little princess loved it and hugged him, kissing him on the cheek. Thank you, Daddy. Today was her 4th birthday. Grandpa's gift was practical. A bank card. Grandma, being the only woman in the house, had given Mia an amusement park, which she had started building 6 months ago. It could be said that, apart from the lack of a mother's love, Mia was truly happy. In the evening, she clung to Jeffrey, refusing to go to sleep. Daddy, tell me a story. Ever since Mia had learned to read, she had taken to reading storybooks on her own, but today, even if she wasn't the birthday girl, Jeffrey would indulge her. He doted on Mia. Okay. An hour later, the little girl still wasn't sleepy and asked Jeffrey to continue the story. She was feeling down, clutching tightly to her father's hand, her eyes, so much like her mother's, blinking as if revealing her worries. Jeffrey's recent decline in health was so evident that even a child like her could see it. She was more mature than her peers, understanding far more. She knew about death and what the loss of a loved one meant. She was afraid that her dad might also leave for another world, just like her mom did. Jeffrey tucked her in snugly. Would you like to hear a story about me and your mom? Her eyes lit up. Yes. I fell in love with your mom at first sight when I was 17, nobody knows. In an instant, I held my breath. I saw him slowly say with a smile. She had very short hair and came out of the women's restroom, mistaking me for thinking she was a boy. She hurriedly explained when she saw me pick up my phone. Actually, I just noticed that her school pants were dirty, so I was calling a senior I knew to bring her a sanitary pad. Years have passed, and these memories have fragmented, losing coherence. There's not much I can remember. Summer camp wasn't the first time we met. The year before, I was in Rain Village, watching her sing folk songs by the bonfire, laughing freely. Later, I followed her team to Lhasa and Mount Everest. The starry sky was beautiful, twinkling. She watched it tirelessly all night, perhaps to commemorate that moment. They lit sparklers. Your mother handed me a lit sparkler, casting light on her cheeks, her eyes as beautiful as the stars themselves. Jeffrey could remember which year, month, day, hour, minute, and second it was. Because that was when he fell for Karen, at that altitude of 848 meters. The rapid heartbeat caused by altitude sickness was nothing compared to her laughter. Explaining why you like someone is hard. It happens in an instant, a heartbeat triggered by some sort of alignment. It sounds absurd, illogical, yet irresistibly sweet. I sat silently. I didn't even realize time had passed again. All was pitch black before me, no sound, no light, just solitude. I was trying hard to remember, but somehow I couldn't recall anything. I even began to forget some important things. Jeffrey agreed to a blind date. His mother-in-law was incredulous. Are you sure about this? The man washed his face with cold water, looking rather ordinary. Let's start tomorrow morning, at 10, I'll be there on time. He spoke as if announcing a seminar, clarifying that the purpose of this blind date was indeed a serious affair. At 10 in the morning, Jeffrey arrived half an hour early. Mr. Jeffrey, hello, I am Sarah, said the lady in a business suit sitting across on the sofa. She was poised, her gaze measured and not overly scrutinizing. Hello. Both valued punctuality, and 10 minutes of conversation was enough. Clearly, there was little interest on both sides. Miss Sarah had squeezed this into her schedule. She had to rush to a meeting and soon stood up to leave. Good luck with your date today, Mr. Jeffrey. Jeffrey walked her to the door and thanked her, from 10 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. Back and forth, who knows how many cups of coffee had been replaced in front of Jeffrey. The last one arrived late. She looked young, intentionally letting her hair on the left side fall to cover a scar on her face. She spoke without daring to look at Jeffrey. Her voice was very soft. Mr. Jeffrey. Jeffrey asked what she would like to drink. She shook her head. Sorry, I'm not used to drinking coffee. The waiter brought over a cup of warm water. Her name was Hebe James, 23 years old. A graduate in preschool education, her mother had passed away less than a month ago, and her father had remarried quickly, making her feel unwelcome at home. Jeffrey had some impression of the James family. Mr. James had a good reputation outside, with a harmonious family and dutiful children. Now, it seemed that was not entirely the case. Hebe was the only daughter in the James family. Her visit this time was just a formal appearance. Exhausted and with a numb look in her eyes, Hebe pleaded, Mr. Jeffrey, may I stay here a little longer? If they see me leaving so soon, Jeffrey asked her, do you want to leave the James family? She finally looked up. Do you like children? She nodded emphatically, smiling sheepishly. I've thought for a long time that when I'm older, I'd adopt a child and live a life just the two of us. Mr. Jeffrey, to be honest, I actually don't like men. Jeffrey's face showed little surprise. He believed sexual orientation wasn't absolute and respected differences. He proceeded cautiously with his next question. Do you have someone you like? Hebe gave a bitter smile. I used to, but not anymore. I gave up when she swung a knife at me. Have you thought about marrying a woman? She thought for 3 seconds, then shook her head. I don't deny that true love exists in this world, but I'm sure it won't happen to me. I don't want to be trapped in a romantic illusion. I want to take a different path. Jeffrey mentioned there was a path and asked if she would take it. Hebe wasn't naive, just surprised to find herself chosen. I can help you leave the James family. You can achieve what you want. I have only one condition. Take care of my daughter as she grows up. He added, you have time to think it over. And the right to refuse. I'm not a saint, but I can support you at work so you have the strength to resist the James family. When you succeed later, you can repay me. This is a transaction based on mutual benefits. Hebe was contemplating. Just as Jeffrey was about to hand out his business card, she looked up and said earnestly, okay, my timing couldn't have been worse. Just as I was grasping the situation, I heard Jeffrey say, then let's give it a try. It didn't hurt as much as I imagined it would. After all these years, he should have let go. Being too fixated on the past hurts both parties. To love someone is to wish them happiness. Frankly, my relationship with Jeffrey was also lacking in bravery. I thought I died in the year I loved him most. I never knew that was also when he loved me the most. There was just one step between us that neither dared take. To put it harshly, we were masochists, but the cost of not telling the truth was too high. Separated as if by life and death, yet, if I were to go back to that moment, I might hesitate endlessly before taking that step. If the response I heard wasn't what I hoped for, without this barrier of a window, how much longer could Jeffrey and I have lasted? Due to my family background, I can hardly trust in matters of the heart. I believe that when we first got together, there was genuine affection involved. But sincerity is hardly worth mentioning. It's fickle and so cheap that it can be given to many at once. Eventually, I came to understand the confusion I had back then. It was rooted in insecurity. Jeffrey didn't make his remarriage public. He kept Hebe by Mia's side under the guise of a nutritionist. I'm unaware of how their relationship unfolded, as my time here became intermittent and gradually less frequent. The name Karen slowly ceased to be mentioned, as if she had never existed. I think it's time to say goodbye to this world. The 5th year, Mia started elementary school. During a school spring outing, she got lost in the woods. Jeffrey called the police and organized a large search party. It lasted until the evening. Hebe, carrying Mia on her back, descended from the mountain. She was barefoot, her coat given to Mia, her whole appearance disheveled and utterly exhausted. Everyone was stunned. Because she was supposed to be in the hospital awaiting surgery, Hebe had recently been diagnosed with a tumor. Fortunately caught early, Jeffrey took Mia from her arms. He had someone assist Hebe to rest. The next day, Mia hugged Hebe, who was about to enter the surgery room. You need to get well. Over the years, Jeffrey kept Hebe close by. He taught her about human interactions and how to navigate the world. On the day he publicly acknowledged Hebe's role, Jeffrey reallocated his assets. A portion was set aside for his parents, a portion for Hebe, and the rest was Mia's, to be hers when she grew up. Including the company, everyone said Jeffrey had moved on. They also said that the person from the past few years didn't resemble Jeffrey at all, that he should have been shining bright. They were all happy for him. Suddenly, a white pill bottle fell to the floor. Jeffrey knelt, supporting himself against the wall. his vision blurred, unable to see anything clearly. He opened a drawer and took out another bottle. The bottle that fell contained sleeping pills. This one was for depression. A bitter taste surged in his throat, and as he opened his mouth, blood spilled out onto the white carpet. The man lay down powerless, breathing heavily, blood still flowing from his mouth over his cheeks, his blood-stained fingers tightly clutching the carpet, the veins on the back of his hand prominently visible. He was barely clinging to life. This phrase fits perfectly. He was indeed barely clinging to life. 3 days ago, Simon pleaded with him, "Jeffrey, you are about to die. Karen can't come back. Do you also no longer wish to live?" He didn't believe it. He wasn't ill. He was living just fine. He could feel his heartbeat, work, eat, and sleep. It's just that, for some reason, he felt a great emptiness inside. He seemed to have forgotten something. It might have been an event, or a person, a long time ago. He had a dream, Jeffrey. It was a woman's voice. He lay on the lawn, squinting in the blinding sunlight. A beautiful hand appeared above, shading him from the sun. "Jeffrey, stop sleeping." The woman was holding a plum blossom in her arms. "Who are you?" She smiled and said, "I'm Karen." His eyes were blank. "Who is Karen?" The woman bent down, and the scent of the plum blossom intensified. She caressed Jeffrey's face, her eyes filled with deep affection. "Karen is your wife." Karen was Jeffrey's wife, but she had been gone for a long time. He tried to grasp her, but she dodged, and he only caught a plum blossom. "Will you forget me?" "Never." The Karen in his dream cried, calling him a liar. "I don't want to see you again. Go away. Don't come back." "Karen." He woke up. His eyes were full of panic and unease. There was no plum blossom in his palm. He couldn't find Karen anymore. There was still a needle in the back of his hand, and half of the fluid was left. He pulled out the needle, and without even grabbing his coat, he rushed out the door. At the street corner, he entered a tattoo parlor that was lit with a sign. He had Karen's name tattooed on his neck. That way, he would never forget again. Jeffrey had lived a very orderly and rational life. This was probably the first time he had ever rebelled. In the 5th year after my death, Jeffrey gave up everything. He had everything in order. He had dinner with his parents. Leaving a will before he left, he took Mia to the amusement park one last time. The little girl, under Hebe's care, had grown well and became more talkative. He had drinks with Simon. Simon initially objected, his health now so poor that a minor cold could be fatal. Jeffrey smiled lightly and said, "If we miss this, there won't be another chance." He knew what it meant, so he had the best wine from the cellar brought over. That wine was better, it wouldn't harm the body. And Jeffrey would live a bit longer. That night, they drank until dawn. Simon sat on the ground, crying unrestrainedly. He was crying for Jeffrey. "You're still so young. What will Mia do if you die? Why is it you? Why is it Karen? Jeffrey, what are we supposed to do?" Drunk, at last, he fell into a deep sleep. Jeffrey covered him with a blanket. It was almost dawn. He chose to leave when everyone was unprepared. He had drunk alcohol, so he couldn't drive, so he walked to the cemetery. When he saw the tombstone with Karen's name, he stopped and caught his breath. His body had been hurting on the way up. Fortunately, he had brought painkillers. The plum tree planted by Karen had been transplanted here. It hadn't bloomed in several years and was completely lifeless. The assistant said the tree wouldn't survive. He couldn't let go. On the other side of the plum tree, there was a new tombstone, still without a name. That was the space Jeffrey had reserved for himself. The next day, Jeffrey flew to Hokkaido. He took the room card from the hotel butler. "Mr. Jeffrey, the room you reserved for us 4 years ago is finally awaiting your arrival today." I don't recall when I appeared. I merely opened my eyes and found myself following Jeffrey's gaze. The room was almost entirely made of transparent glass. What was visible upon opening my eyes was only snow. This honeymoon trip was many years overdue. Jeffrey took a photo of the hotel room and then another of the outside. He checked each carefully, with great attention to detail. At night, sitting on the sofa by the window, his lean figure was reflected on the clear glass. Before going abroad, he discarded all his medication, partly because there was no hope, partly because he didn't want to hold on. The lights in the room stayed on all night, and I stayed with him. The next day, very early, Jeffrey didn't take anything with him, just placed a bright yellow envelope in his coat pocket. He stood before the mirror, shaving his beard meticulously, plucking a few white hairs at his temples as if it was routine. It was as if he was preparing for a very important appointment. The snow fell silently. Only the crunching sound of the man walking on thick snow could be heard. In Hokkaido, there is a place called Tengu Mountain. There, a statue of Tengu is said to ward off evil spirits and fulfill wishes if you touch its nose. Taking the cable car up, not far away, a couple held hands and shared stories. If you propose to your lover there, the heavenly gods will look after you, and your wish will be granted. Is that true? You don't believe it. The girl playfully expressed her disbelief. The next second, the boy knelt on one knee, a ring already prepared in his hand. Then why don't we prove it? Jeffrey didn't hurry. He took photos along the way. The orange-yellow light gave the snow a second hue. An elderly man nearly slipped, and Jeffrey caught him. He called for help and even gave him his scarf. The old man said the snow was heavy, advising him to take his time going up the mountain. His gaze was serene. There's no time left. He wore only a black coat over a black shirt, his exposed hands reddened by the wind. The snow fell heavier, quickly covering his footprints. This journey had no purpose but to resolve a longing. Few people were on the mountain. Everything was enveloped in white, with only a solitary figure stubbornly ascending. He reached the observation tower at the summit of Tengu Mountain. He also touched the Tengu statue. As for the wish he made, no one knew. I stopped, watching his figure recede. Bowing my head, my body began to turn transparent. The 5-year term was up. This time, it really was goodbye. Tears could no longer be held back, unnoticed. They fell into the snow, watching him, forever out of reach. I softly said, "Goodbye, Jeffrey." Suddenly, without warning, Jeffrey bent over and vomited blood onto the snow. A shocking contrast, clutching his chest. He was in too much pain to straighten up. He didn't understand what was happening. This pain was different, not physical. Looking back, there was nothing. Unable to walk any further, he just stopped. As his hand reached into his pocket, he also took out the letter. It read, "Secrets Jeffrey doesn't know." He had never opened it. It took the man 5 minutes to open the letter. His strength nearly spent, as he unfolded the letter. The handwriting brought him back to the days when Karen was still around. The letter was filled with scattered snippets of everyday life. Jeffrey himself doesn't know, but when he lies, he slightly bites his lower lip. He said those flowers were chosen by his assistant, but he doesn't know that I know his handwriting like the back of my hand. The card hidden among the flowers. I've kept it all along. Mr. Jeffrey is always busy with work. His days so dull I couldn't stand it. I suggested planting flowers in his office. He had no objections, but when I had someone tear down a wall to make space for a plum tree, the expression on Mr. Jeffrey's face was priceless. He seemed at a loss for words. I never exposed him. It was always he who watered them for me. Oh, I did it on purpose. Jeffrey did something very important without telling me. A nurse at the hospital let it slip. The day I gave birth, just after I left the delivery room. He went to consult a doctor about getting a vasectomy, and had the surgery done while I was napping, lying to me that he was going to work overtime. He read carefully, taking in every detail. These small, noted-down details seemed to bring the writer's laughter to life. Muttering and grumbling, the wind blew through the mountains, rustling the pages. He read it over and over again. The wind made his eyes dry. At the end of the letter, there was a photo. In the photo, 18-year-old Karen was secretly shading Jeffrey, who was asleep on the lawn. The girl's eyes were curved in a smile. On the back of the photo, she had written, "The year we graduated." I begged the student council for this photo. They asked why I wanted it, and I lied, saying it was an unflattering laugh, meant to be destroyed. Instead, I hid it in my diary year after year, often sneaking peeks at it, thinking that someday I would confess and show it to you. Look. I married the man I fell in love with when I was 18. Tears fell on the photo. His fingertips slowly caressed the girl's face. Karen had died, and he hadn't cried. He hadn't cried when Mia asked why there was no mother, nor had he cried upon seeing Karen's look-alike. But at this moment, he couldn't help but cry. His hand holding the photo trembled, trying not to crease it. He had finally found what was missing in his heart. Karen's face, Karen's voice, Karen laughing, Karen crying. These memories suddenly filled his mind. He hadn't forgotten Karen. He had just briefly lost his memory. The accumulation of medications over time had caused him to lose parts of his memory. So afterward, apart from painkillers, he threw all his medications away. He was guilty. He had lost what was most important. At the beginning of his fate, at 17, he traveled alone to treat his heart disease. In Rain Village, he met that special girl, her face smiling, her eyes full of pessimism. Unconsciously, he followed her shadow to many places. His affection for her was realized only later. That very ordinary summer, the girl took the book covering his face, her eyes both mischievous and innocent. Her tone feigned sincerity. Jeffrey, please. It was then that he found his answer to transfer schools. Because he liked Karen, he wanted to spend more time with Karen. At the end of the story, the man sat on a snow-covered bench. The snow was blinding. He leaned back, resting against the back of the bench, covering his face with the letter, eyes closed. Longing is a monster that devours. It took his sanity, burned his consciousness, and eventually left him a hollow shell. Like a breathing corpse, the snow slowly fell. As time slowly passed, Jeffrey, he heard Karen's voice. It was as if he was back on that afternoon. The noisy classroom faded into the background as the girl lifted the book from his face, her eyes pleading, Jeffrey, will you promise, please? He looked at her intently, unable to tear his gaze away. Okay, I'll promise anything, just don't leave. Then, his hand reached around Karen's neck, pulling her into a kiss. Tears splashed onto the girl's face. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.